Tom Riddle was 7 years old when Alice and Henry Alderton first saw him at Wool's orphanage. The cramped bedroom was drenched in dull winter sunlight, revealing a boy sitting alone by the window, ankles crossed, staring off at a horizon that London's endless rooftops hid away. Alice, a gentle, thoughtful woman who had never quite shaken off the heartbreak of multiple miscarriages, had eyes that flickered with guarded hope. Henry, a soft-spoken archivist at the British Museum, drew her close for comfort as they approached. The boy turned slowly, meeting their gaze with inquisitive dark eyes. His posture was rigid, as if any moment a hard blow might knock him from his seat. And although his face was unreadable, there was something fragile about the quiet hush that enveloped him. A caretaker hovered in the background, but her eyes softened the moment she saw the Aldertons kneel down to speak to Tom. Something in her posture hinted that these visitors were different from the countless prospective adoptive parents who came and left. Perhaps they possessed the gentleness Tom needed, or maybe it was the way Alice's voice trembled as she introduced herself. In that moment, an unspoken bond started to form. Tom had no inkling that this visit would be any different from the others. He had become used to the process. Potential adopters walked in, they asked a few questions, observed the children, and then left with or without a promise to return. Usually, they didn't. He had grown skilled at removing any hope from the entire experience, preferring numb detachment to the sting of disappointment. But Alice had a voice like warm honey, and Henry looked at him not with pity, but with genuine interest. Tom lifted his gaze from the floor to watch them carefully, not sure if he should speak or let them carry on. Alice reached into her purse and extended the boy a small tin of toffees, a gesture so simple yet thoughtful that Tom felt his throat tighten. He mumbled a quiet "thank you," clutched the tin, and continued listening. Henry asked if Tom enjoyed reading, whether he liked the city or gardens, if he had any favorite subjects at school. Tom felt guarded, but he answered with honest brevity. "I like to read about ancient civilizations. I like quiet places." When Tom was told that the Aldertons had decided to adopt him, he neither wept nor jumped with glee. Instead, he stood still, feeling a curious awareness that everything from this moment forward would shift. As the caretaker gently packed his modest belongings, some battered books, a few clothes, a keepsake tie, Tom stole a glance in the hallway mirror. He saw a boy with an oddly solemn expression, out of sync with his young age. It wasn't fear, nor was it pure happiness. Rather, it felt as if the gears of destiny were moving in a new direction, and he had no idea whether it would lead him to fortune or ruin. Later that evening, he stood on the orphanage steps with a small suitcase in hand as Henry opened the car door and Alice spread a blanket on the seat for him. Tom climbed in, that small act symbolic of entering a brand new life. The Alderton home was modest but brimming with gentle warmth. Lace curtains framed the windows, and in the living room, shelves sagged with well-worn books on history, botany, even folklore. Everything smelled faintly of parchment and tea leaves. Alice fussed over the kettle while Henry pointed out which room would become Tom's bedroom. Tom stared at the walls painted a pale, comforting green, a small bed neatly made in the corner. On the desk lay a few carefully chosen items: a blank journal with an embossed cover, a fountain pen, and a potted plant in a chipped terracotta container. The plant had slender leaves trailing down, reminiscent of a living waterfall. Henry explained it was a philodendron that he and Alice had nurtured together. Something about being gifted a living, growing thing, an unspoken promise that it needed care just as he did, made Tom's heart catch. He found an unexpected tranquility in that new home. Each morning at breakfast, Alice placed a plate of warm toast and a glass of milk in front of him, greeting him with a soft, "Good morning, my darling boy." Henry would be halfway through a newspaper, but he'd glance over the top to ask Tom about his upcoming school day. Tom was not sure how to handle such consistent kindness, so he responded with polite but cautious words. Yet day after day, he discovered himself gradually relaxing, a layer of that watchful tension peeling away. In the evenings, Henry would show Tom some of his archive materials: woodcut prints, ancient manuscripts, fragments of clay pottery, and explain the historical or mythical significance behind them. Tom devoured this knowledge. He was a sponge, enthralled by tales of ancient kingdoms, arcane symbols, long-vanished gods. When he mispronounced a word or asked an odd question, Henry never belittled him. Instead, he patiently guided Tom through each explanation, encouraging him to explore further. It took several weeks for Tom to realize that something about him seemed different from other boys. Strange, inexplicable incidents would occur in his presence, remnants of a magic he neither understood nor controlled. One afternoon, Tom grew angry at a group of bullies jeering at him in the schoolyard. They pushed him around, mocking him for his second-hand trousers and quiet demeanor. Filled with rage, Tom clenched his fists as something inside him coiled like a steel spring. Suddenly, a gust of wind whipped across the yard, knocking the bullies flat on their backs and scattering their books. It happened so abruptly that the other children screamed, and Tom found himself standing in the midst of it, heart pounding as he realized he hadn't even touched them. Later that evening, he expected fury from the Aldertons or harsh punishment. Instead, Henry looked deeply worried and held Tom's hands in his own. "I don't quite understand what happened," Henry murmured, "but I know you're not a bad child. We need to figure this out together." That night, Tom overheard Alice and Henry discussing his potential gifts in hushed, tentative voices. Neither of them could confirm the existence of magic, only that there were tales, legends, some unusual phenomena that made their way into Henry's archives. Perhaps, they theorized, Tom was one of those rare individuals with abilities beyond common understanding. Instead of being frightened or pushing Tom away, they did their best to make him feel safe. Alice found him staring tearfully at the wall the next morning. Without hesitation, she cradled him and stroked his hair, whispering, "You're our son, Tom. We'll face this together." The gentle reassurance in her tone was unlike anything Tom had known before. For so long, he had braced himself for rejection, as if every strange occurrence would drive people away. But here he was, in a quiet house warmed by the love of two parents who saw beyond his outbursts. The relief he felt was immeasurable, and for the first time in his young life, Tom discovered the comforting certainty that he was wanted. Seasons passed. Tom's curiosity about his strange powers blossomed. He tried to keep them in check, using them only when he felt an extreme surge of emotion. Eventually, Henry uncovered a mention in an obscure text referencing a secret society of magical folk, something about a school called Hogwarts. At first, it seemed absurd, like a mere children's tale. But the more he looked into it, the more references he found. And then an invitation arrived on official parchment, delivered by an owl that swooped right into the Aldertons' living room, scattering a stack of Henry's research notes across the floor. The letter read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry invites Mr. Tom Riddle to attend as a first-year student." Tom's eyes widened, and Henry and Alice stared at each other, half in awe, half in a swirl of nervous excitement. Alice quickly took Tom's hand, her eyes shining. "My darling boy," she murmured with a trembling smile. "It seems the world is even more extraordinary than we dared to imagine." Arranging Tom's new schooling was a whirlwind. The discovery of Diagon Alley, the purchase of a wand from Ollivanders, all the while Henry and Alice shadowing their son, determined to support him in this unknown realm. The experience felt surreal. A hidden street alive with the bustle of robed witches and wizards, shops selling ingredients for potions, cauldrons, telescopes, and more wonders than Tom could have ever dreamed. He clutched his new wand, an 11-inch piece of yew with a phoenix feather core, the wood's polished surface fitting his palm as if carved precisely for him. Mr. Ollivander, peering at him with watery silver eyes, remarked softly, "You wands can be powerful in the right hands. They have a certain predisposition for greatness, if handled wisely." Tom felt a shiver at those words, equal parts caution and excitement, but the presence of Alice and Henry beside him soothed his nerves. With them near, he believed he had a chance to harness this power responsibly, to ensure it would not rule him. When Tom boarded the Hogwarts Express, wearing robes that were slightly too large around the shoulders, he looked out the window to see Alice dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, Henry standing next to her, offering a wave of encouragement. Tom waved back, feeling a pang of homesickness before he had even left. Then, quite unexpectedly, he found a seat next to two curious fellow first-years, a bright-eyed boy named Ethan and a spirited girl called Beatrice. They asked if he knew any spells yet, if his parents were magical, if he'd heard about Quidditch. Tom had only half the answers. He admitted he was adopted by a Muggle family, and they had discovered his magic only by accident. There was no shame in his voice, only awe for the events that had led him here. And to his relief, Ethan and Beatrice seemed fascinated rather than scornful. They shared sweets from the trolley, laughed about what house they might end up in, and for the first time, Tom felt an unfamiliar sensation: companionship among peers. The Sorting Hat, perched precariously on Tom's head in the great hall, hummed in a low, raspy voice, rummaging through the folds of his mind. Tom sat stone still, heart hammering, recalling every memory of kindness the Aldertons had shown him. The hat took its time, muttering about cunning, about ambition, about intellect, but there was also bravery and loyalty there. After several tense moments, the hat declared with an emphatic tone, "Gryffindor!" and the table under the red and gold banner erupted in applause. Tom slid off the stool and joined his new house, cheeks burning from excitement he had never permitted himself to feel before. As he sat down, he saw the cunning glint in a few Slytherins' eyes, but he had no regrets. From that day forward, the tapestry of fate wove a different pattern than the one it might have followed had he never known a loving family. Tom's Hogwarts years were a heady blend of fascination and discovery. He devoured his lessons. Transfiguration, charms, potions. Each opened windows into worlds he never knew existed. He quickly demonstrated exceptional skill in Parseltongue, discovered when he accidentally spoke to a garden snake coiled in the greenhouse. Whispers circulated among his classmates, echoing rumors that only the darkest wizards spoke Parseltongue. But Tom, though intrigued by his unusual ability, neither basked in it nor employed it to sow fear. Instead, under Professor Dumbledore's watchful eye, he learned to treat his snake-speaking gift as just another tool to be used wisely. Perhaps the old wizard sensed the latent potential for darkness lurking in Tom, but he also recognized the boy's capacity for empathy, something that blossomed each time Tom received a letter from home, reading the tender words from Alice and Henry about how proud they were, how they couldn't wait for his holiday visit. Whenever Tom returned for the Christmas and summer breaks, his parents welcomed him with open arms and carefully nurtured his evolving identity as both a wizard and a cherished son. They'd spend evenings chatting at the kitchen table, Tom animatedly recounting the latest magical marvel he'd witnessed. Henry often asked for more details about Hogwarts traditions, while Alice occasionally teased him about any crushes or new friendships he'd formed. The house was peppered with small magical touches Tom had introduced, like enchanted candle flames that never burned down or a battered old typewriter that typed letters by itself whenever Henry spoke too loudly in its vicinity. Although these enchantments sometimes caused comedic mishaps, Alice and Henry embraced them with patient wonder. In turn, Tom learned the delicate responsibility of explaining that, for the safety and secrecy of the magical community, visitors outside the family mustn't see or suspect anything out of the ordinary. Their trust in him only deepened his commitment to using his powers wisely. The boy who once felt deeply alone discovered that he had a circle of true friends at Hogwarts. He grew close to Ethan, Beatrice, and a thoughtful Ravenclaw named Dorothy. They formed a study group, competing good-naturedly for the highest marks. There were late-night escapades in the Gryffindor common room, laughter drifting around the fireplace, and a healthy dose of mischief, like the time they filled Professor Merithoth's office with conjured balloon toads that hopped wildly at the slightest sound. Tom's sense of humor emerged in quiet but piercing wit, surprising classmates who still held an image of him as the reserved orphan boy. Slowly but certainly, his reputation morphed from that aloof child with rumored powers of dark speech into a driven, imaginative young wizard, always ready to defend a friend in need. Still, despite the warmth that filled Tom's life, he occasionally felt whispers of his past echo through him. He had an innate thirst for knowledge, especially knowledge that delved into obscure or taboo subjects. dark tomes and cryptic references drew his attention with a magnetic pull. At times, he caught himself poring over restricted spells or forbidden lore, feeling an almost gravitational desire to understand them. But it was Henry's gentle voice that haunted him in moments of temptation. "We need to figure this out together." The memory of Alice's unconditional embrace also lingered like a shield around his heart. Even at his most curious, Tom would remember their love and make a conscious choice to step back from the brink. He did not want to betray the trust of the family who had given him a second chance at innocence. In his 5th year, Tom was confronted by a baffling puzzle, a series of magical mishaps across the castle that left students petrified. Rumors spread about the legendary Chamber of Secrets, and soon old wives' tales pointed to the heir of Slytherin walking the corridors. Tom, hearing the phrase heir of Slytherin, felt a chill as if the entire school was glancing sideways at him. In secret, he investigated. Slipping through libraries and hidden passages, he learned of Salazar Slytherin's monstrous creation, of the basilisk rumored to dwell below. He found references to a Gaunt family, direct descendants of Slytherin, and discovered documents linking them to a dark legacy of cruelty. Each new revelation hammered at Tom's heart with the question: could he be connected to that lineage? If so, what evil slumbered within him, waiting to be awakened? One evening, while reading a dusty genealogical scroll in the restricted section, he stumbled upon the name Marvolo Gaunt, and with it, the name of a child rumored to have been abandoned. Tom's breath caught. He had always known Riddle was the name of his father, but he had never learned the identity of his mother. The references suggested a tragic woman named Merope Gaunt, an outcast. In that quiet corner of the library, Tom felt torn between rage at a father who had cast him aside and anguish that he might be the last living tie to Salazar Slytherin's line, a heritage known for darkness. It was a legacy he had never asked for, but it was as much a part of him as his capacity for kindness. He wrestled with the information, momentarily tempted to open the Chamber of Secrets himself, to stare into the eyes of the basilisk and see if he commanded it. Yet, recalling every warm memory with Alice and Henry, he shuddered at what might happen if he allowed malice to grip his soul. Instead of following in Slytherin's footsteps, Tom confided in Professor Dumbledore. In a trembling voice, he explained what he had discovered, the fear that he might be the heir, and the nightmares that tormented him, urging him to open the chamber. Dumbledore listened with grave empathy. He placed a comforting hand on Tom's shoulder and spoke quietly. "Your heritage does not define your destiny, Tom. How you choose to use your gifts, that is who you are. You have a father and mother who love you, you have friends who trust you, and you have the power to choose the light." Moved by these words, Tom vowed he would never let his lineage guide him into cruelty or fear. Instead, with Dumbledore's guidance and the support of his friends, Tom worked tirelessly to protect his school. When another student was found petrified near a bathroom flooded by ghostly tears from moaning Myrtle, Tom helped to guide staff investigators to the hidden tunnels. The basilisk was discovered and destroyed before it claimed any lives. Tom's name was cleared, and he felt a quiet mixture of relief and resolve as the castle breathed again in safety. By the time Tom reached his 7th year, he was a young man with a reputation for intellectual brilliance, fierce loyalty to his friends, and an aura of quiet strength. He was neither the golden boy of Gryffindor nor the shadowy heir of Slytherin. He was simply Tom Riddle, shaped by the compassion of those who believed in him. During the final feast before graduation, as banners of each house floated under the enchanted sky, Headmaster Dippet praised the unity that Hogwarts displayed, acknowledging Tom as one of the shining examples of bridging past legacies with a bright, inclusive future. The hall roared with applause, and Tom's eyes found the proud faces of Henry and Alice, sitting among the guests. They waved, tears glimmering. Tom's heart surged with gratitude. After leaving Hogwarts, Tom continued his pursuit of knowledge, but always with a tempered sense of morality that set him apart from the dark paths so often whispered about the Slytherin bloodline. He joined the Department of Magical Research within the Ministry, working to unravel hidden historical curses that threatened both wizard and muggle communities. In each triumph, he saw the reflection of the boy who, in another reality, might have been shaped by misery and neglect. He chose to prove that love, when given freely and consistently, had the power to steer even the most tempestuous fate toward good. There were days he still felt the echo of darker impulses nudging him toward forbidden spells or a path of absolute power. But every time he felt that shadow, he remembered how Alice had listened so intently to his stories about Hogwarts, never flinching at the mention of serpents or curses. He remembered Henry's laugh when dusty volumes revealed some newly discovered text, and how they pored over it together, father and son united in intellectual wonder. Whenever Tom felt the old anger or arrogance swelling inside him, he took a breath and thought, "Love saved me from that." The knowledge that someone saw him as worthy before he was able to see it himself reminded Tom that he was more than an unfortunate legacy. He was a living testament to compassion, nurtured by the unwavering bond of family. Years later, when Tom visited the Alderton household on a crisp autumn day, he walked the familiar path up the front steps and entered the living room. The same bookshelf stuffed with old tomes greeted him. The philodendron thrived in its pot near the window, and the crocheted blankets still adorned the sofa. Alice, hair now streaked with silver, rushed to hug him. Henry's stooped figure emerged from behind a pile of notes at the table, his face lighting up with paternal pride. They embraced, and for a long moment, the three simply stood there, reveling in a quiet warmth that transcended all the twists and turns life had thrown at them. In the corner, a trunk neatly sat, stuffed with a few magical items Tom had brought for them as gifts. Spell-infused instruments to make the garden bloom year-round, and a portrait that talked with visitors about local folklore, carefully bewitched to stay unremarkable if a stranger walked in. As the evening wore on, they chatted about Tom's experiences at the ministry, about new archaeological finds Henry had assisted in cataloging, about how Alice busied herself with local community events. All the while, Tom thought back to the small boy he once was, a solitary figure by the window of an orphanage, afraid of being unchosen, unloved. He wondered how drastically fate had changed because of two open-hearted souls who refused to see him as unworthy or doomed by an unfortunate heritage. A surge of tenderness coursed through him, and he rose to help Alice make tea, wanting to repay just a fraction of the generosity they had shown him. As he stirred the steaming cups, he looked at Alice's gentle smile and Henry's beaming gratitude, their love weaving all around him like a protective spell. And in that simple, unremarkable moment, Tom Riddle felt a sense of belonging that no dark power or twisted ambition could ever replace.